The cloud. Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to No One is Perfect. Kind of a funny conversation we had before, and here we are again. So today, hi Marty, we're joined with a special guest. Her name is Erin, and she is a trained ceremonialist, an embodiment teacher, and psychosomatic healing guide. And her work is really based in that the body isn't the problem, it's the portal. So it begins to give us answers and learning to listen to the body. And we've talked about quite a bit how ungrounded life feels right now in our world on the planet because of the chaos and uncertainty that is happening. And I really thought bringing Erin on is a good way to offer another resource for people because I think the more resources we can have if we're feeling dysregulated, some might fit better with other people. And Erin, you've been practicing this for 14 years, so I know you're well versed in the body and embodiment. And I would love to hear a little bit about you and how you got into this and the teaching of embodiment.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I started out, I've always sort of been sort of fascinated by, by the body. And I think this time in my life, which was probably more like 2015, 2016, just really recognizing like I couldn't even acknowledge a feeling that I was having. I'd have this experience of having an experience with someone and then 3 or 4 days later, having this thought of like, wow, I really didn't like that, or like I would just have a thought about it and I'd get into a thought loop about things and recognizing I really didn't know how to talk about what I was feeling. And relationships were just, just a big ball of chaos, knew nothing about communication. It was just always a big mess in my experience, like sort of a jumbled mess in expressing myself or learning how to express what I needed or wanted. I mean, it was just really not even in my scope. And I met my current partner and he had done like some men's work with a particular teacher that worked in this embodiment realm, specifically around sexual polarity and intimacy and relationship. And so we got involved just for experiential thing. And at first I had a lot of resistance to it because I just thought it was a little strange, like what do you mean we're going to get into this room and do things like, and when I first went I was very triggered right off the bat, which just showed me that I had all kinds of stuff in there that I didn't know was there. But it was a 3-day weekend, and at the end of the weekend I felt so free. I felt so open. I remember Andy took me to a restaurant. It was at the end. We went out to dinner. And I remember just walking in the restaurant thinking, wow, like who is this? I just felt more alive. I felt more present. I felt more, the best way I could put it, like me. Like whatever
Mm.
that was, I felt like me. Like if I didn't know who me was, I'm like, this right here is me, and I want more of this. And so we participated in a program and then we started assisting in the programs. And so we'd go to these retreats and we were kind of assisting and training and learning. And then an opportunity came up to start teaching more in the realm of feminine embodiment, like so working specifically with women. And so I fell into it because I was drawn to it because I loved the way I felt.
Mm.
And I just wanted more of that. So I kept coming back because I wanted to experience more of that, whatever that was. And then I got into teaching, which had a completely different experience and reward with that. Getting to, learn how to hold space and work with other people who have maybe gone through some of the same struggles that I had gone through. So that was the initial start of it. And then it kind of morphs from there into how I got here. Yeah.
Yeah, if I could share, I love what you said because I think that's so key for all of us. Like we get into what we're doing because it's like, I don't know, I'm feeling improvement. Like I never thought I would tap with other people, and then I'm like, well, if I could help them, I'd
Yeah.
like to help them. So I love that. I love it. Yeah.
That, and I loved what you said about you felt more of me.
Yeah.
I think that is like $1 million thing because I find in my practice, and Marty, you might as well, so many people aren't sure of who that is or even what that means. Like, literally, what does that mean, more of me?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
because we grow up with so many different labels and belief systems, and sometimes we're in our 40s or 50s and we're like, I don't like that anymore. Who
Hmm.
am I? And, moving out of relationships. And it's so important, I believe, to really know who we are, and our body is the portal of knowing because it holds the stories of everything that happened to us. And so,
Hmm.
Erin, I'm curious, as you've started working with him with the embodiment piece, what do you notice as people start to work with you? Like, what are some of the things that they get as they become more of them and start to get access to who they are?
Yeah, it's a really great question. Well, firstly, what I have noticed, and for whatever reason, what I find, and mostly with women that come to work with me or want to work with me, usually they come to me, and if I ask them a couple of words, like what are they, what is their intention or what are they wanting more of, it's usually something around power and confidence.
Mm.
Um, Sometimes I hear the word clarity, but I would say like confidence and power are two of the biggest words that I hear. And so, and that has a lot of layers, right? Because it's the first thing I would ask is, what does that mean to you? What is if you knew you felt confident in your body, like what would it feel like? What would that look like? Um, but I think once we start working together, what I find is that the women I have worked with tend to find more access to what is actually true for them. So I think we'll have this idea of what power is, and then we start to recognize like what power really is.
Mm.
And so and a lot of it comes from just an exploration of beginning to track and notice sensations in the body, being able to track what they're feeling, either on a physical level or emotional level, being able to find their own language, and their own experience. So it's really about, and I think in the end, what they end up experiencing is a sense of sovereignty. And again, that's another great word, right? Well, what does that actually mean? And how would I know if I was actually sovereign or not? And I don't really know that we can know what that is until we actually experience it. And so, but that's often what I find they end up experiencing is a sense of power, of being able to access one's own um, inner wisdom, inner intelligence, and just being able to understand like what does that mean to be in a relationship with that, so that I'm not seeking answers outside of myself, which is what so many of us have been conditioned. And then how do I actually source from what's already here and present? And so there tends to be this, and I think the results or the effects of that over some time is more aliveness, a broader range and fuller expression, more clarity around boundaries, um, just more awareness in general of like what is actually present. Because I think we can also have great awareness. And sometimes it takes time, even around the realm of boundaries, because we don't necessarily know we have a boundary until it's actually been crossed or we've crossed our own. And so being able to recognize like where is the boundary or how do you know? And so much of that is just body sensory awareness of recognizing what the body's actually trying to tell us.
Mm. Yeah, I
Yeah,
love what you said there because I think it's so true. We don't know we have a boundary or rule, either of those. And then they're saying, like, oh, that's a rules violation for me. It got crossed. And especially, I love that you work with women because, especially with women, be nice, be pleasing, be kind, be that.
totally.
I mean, I good girled myself practically into a coma, and I am exaggerating, but it's
Yeah.
like, I love that to the empowerment. And again, I think all that can mean something different for everybody, but like speak your truth even if your voice shakes, to be able to finally speak your truth and take up space as a woman.
Yeah.
Like, no, I don't want to do that. No, I'm not going to do that. No, what do I think? What do I feel? I think that's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you just said something about the speaking our truth. I mean, that's even an interesting exploration because I'm finding more and more, working with women that sometimes we don't even know what our truth is until
Yeah.
it's like all of a sudden we've gotten, deeper into our own bodies and our own awareness. And then we're able to connect with, oh, actually, this is what is happening underneath all of this. And I didn't know because we've been taught perhaps to quiet our voices or repress it, or we weren't allowed to ask for what we wanted or, couldn't take up space. And so sometimes we kind of become our own worst I don't know if enemy is the right word, but it's, we start sort of blinding ourselves to what is actually true to keep the peace or not rock the boat. And so, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So true.
And do you find, Erin, so the conversation around power is has many facets to it. So I'm assuming too, you work with people, women, this whole idea of abuse of power,
Mm,
and I would even say with that, that tends to cloud what a boundary even is, depending on someone's life experience. And it sounds like you help people access that in probably many ways, because the patriarchal system that we've been in is all about power. And
hmm
what are we without that? And also, how do we begin to even move into our own power? And that's with voice, that's with taking up space. And so, as you work with people, I'm assuming it's a process. I would love to think there's a quick snap and it's all done.
wouldn't that be great?
Yes, it would.
dang it.
So,
Oh.
yes, the magic wand or the magic snap.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, I'm just feeling into that people would that are aware that they might not have access or even know what that means. How do you see that shows up in someone's body? Like, I would think there's certain signs that people might recognize that you would be a good fit to work with if they're being challenged, maybe around power. And like I said, power has lots of angles to it.
hmm Yeah. So many of the women that I have worked with tend to often they are either in leadership positions themselves or they have or they're in, working collaboratively on a team or in some situation where they're working with people in authority. And that's where I see most of the issues come up with people in leadership. And quite often, it doesn't have to be just men, it can be women, but quite often it is with men in authority positions. That's it happens to be however it was for me, that was my path, and also having male authorities in my life. But it tends to show up in power dynamics. So it's more they come and they potentially start sharing about experiences that they're having, and could be with a friend, family member, or boss, or something like that. And so that's usually a signal for me that there's some sort of power dynamic happening. And so then there's a few different things that I look for. I mean, one is, of course, in their conversation when they're talking about that said power dynamic or said person, what's happening in their body, what's happening with their voice. Is there a particular situation or scene or something that they've experienced? And so I have a couple of different lenses that I look through, and one is certainly through the body and the voice and what comes up for them when they're in an interaction with this person. But we start to look at the layers of what I call tracking energy. And so
Mm,
it's tracking, well, let's go back into that scene and look at, what were the body sensations you had in this experience? Okay, you got triggered. So let's go to that moment. And what were the body sensations you had? And so helping them to be able to track actual body sensations. And then we look at, and, was there a particular emotion, and tracking the emotional tone. And then sometimes tracking also inner dialogue. So sometimes there's inner dialogue, and that's usually a little more, like it's not as easy to, always to access that, but even if there's an idea of what was happening in the dialogue, we can start to look at the pattern of what's happening in the body when they're in that particular dynamic. So, um, yeah, I don't know if that answered your question. Was there more about the,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
it does. It helps me because I think the identification of what the challenge might be. Look,
mm,
so
right.
say you're working with leaders, women who are stepping into leadership, that's happening more and more. For
Hmm.
them and me, I'm also in that to begin to notice those little pieces when the system or the body gets triggered or activated. What you help them do is work through that and
Yeah.
understand it. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, because we tend to have, and there can be different languages. We can talk about it in a psychosomatic sense around the like armoring and the armor bands that we can create in our bodies or get created over time. But there's also an energetic patterning that's associated with it, and so it's associated with sometimes with a dialogue, inner dialogue, thought loop. Also a pattern in the body of like sensations, contraction, um, tightness. Sometimes there's an emotion that's connected to it as well. Um, and so we're tracking it. Yeah, so we're tracking it in that way. And I think I was thinking about what you said about women stepping into leadership and what they're looking for. The thing is I'll often get women, it's like they want to just get through it, and like, how can I get rid of this?
Mhm.
And and even for myself and my own healing journey of that slowing down and recognizing it's really never about getting rid of it. It's
mm,
how much more attuned can we become to our bodies, and how much more can we slow down, where there have been times where I have witnessed myself do the same thing in an interaction with someone in authority, but I'm so much more aware of what's happening in my body. And so I start to look at like, oh, that is actual progress. And so it becomes more about a witnessing, being observant, noticing, oh, I felt that, and how to just be in relationship with it instead of going right to judgment, which was historically my thing. Oh my God, I just, I didn't say what I need to say. I clammed up, or I was so judgmental of how I conducted myself instead of just recognizing, like, getting curious of, oh, that's so interesting. My whole body constricted, and my breath got really short and high, and my voice changed when I started talking. I started talking a little bit like this instead of this lower, more grounded,
Yep.
earthy woman. I would start getting really
yeah.
high pitched, and like the little pleaser good girl, as you had said, Marty, would come out.
Yep.
And Yeah, and the other piece is, and this might be a little bit more like down the line of working with someone, but I really believe, and this is part of some of the training that I've had with, teachers, is if if I want to understand the power dynamics and things that I experience with people in authority, the perceived power dynamics, it's really important that I recognize my own power dynamics with people. So recognizing the ways in which I try to control my environment, or I manipulate, or I edit myself in order to get what I want instead of being really clear and direct. And that has been a journey I've been on for a very long time. And so there's a point in a journey with someone where we can get to that point where we can say, okay, let's actually look at our part in these things, and how can I look at what I do and just take responsibility for it, and then understand what, on a deeper level, like what's happening in these relational dynamics.
Mm. I love that because I do think ultimately when we can get there, it does begin with us. It
Yeah.
doesn't feel good to think that right away, you know. And I
Yeah.
love what you said about just knowing that's progress. I mean, I've seen that in my own life too, where I'm doing the same pattern, but then I'm like, but I'm aware of it. And
Yeah.
that's massive to watch myself. I think it was Eckhart Tolle calls it watching thinker, watching this dynamic playing out, but with mindfulness.
Yeah.
And Christy and I have talked many times about the personal development world and how it's like,
Mm,
just do it and all these pithy quotes. And it's like, to me, it's devoid of the journey, which you
Yeah.
said for us that it's a lifelong journey that we'll be on. So thanks for sharing that. That's really important for people to hear.
Yeah,
mhm,
absolutely. Well, I feel like the whole self-development world too is honestly still on the cusp of that sort of patriarchal programming. And it's a lot of like pushing through,
Uh,
as opposed to like, let's just, yeah, let's just push through and get to the thing. And instead of actually, what if we slow down and more of this sort of this feminine approach, and remember, what does it actually mean to listen to my body and be in relationship with my body, and go at the pace of nature. And it's a completely different paradigm in my experience, I will say.
I love it. Yeah.
well, it's
Yeah.
so counterintuitive to the culture that within the United States, let me just say that because other
Yes.
cultures aren't that way.
Right.
True.
But definitely here, the value lies in productivity, and sometimes the fear around that can be, if I'm not being productive, I'm worthless. If I'm not being productive, I'm, not going to belong, or there's all these different beliefs that we create. And it sounds like, Erin, you help to find those pieces and the beliefs that's held in the nervous system and in the body, and not push through them, but acknowledge them, maybe witness and sit with them. Like,
Hmm.
it makes me think of a mother archetype, literally. And we're talking about the feminine and the mother being the earth, and how, and even the seasons, right? It's so different than how our brains have been taught
Yeah.
to move with our bodies, and even connecting with nature. We're connecting, and it sounds like you help connect to the body, which is again connecting to nature because we are that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the biggest things for me, is recognizing that our bodies are actually made of earth.
Hmm.
And so when we are choosing to listen and be in relationship with our bodies, we're choosing to be in relationship with the earth. Our bodies are made of earth, and of course, they're made of cosmos and cosmic dust and all of the things. And they're literally made of earth. And so when I can look through that lens and remember that this tree outside my window, I am no different from that tree. I'm just sort of made up in a different form. when I'm a living, breathing being, just as this tree, then I can start to then be more curious about what does that actually mean then to be be not just in relationship with my body, but with the earth itself. And the feminine is, the approach of the how I learned in feminine embodiment too, and just in my own exploration is if I am also made of earth and I am also all of these elements and expressions of nature. So, what is it like when I am expressing myself as a volcano?
Love that.
What is it like when I'm expressing myself as a raging river or a soft rain or, a great storm or a songbird, And so there becomes this whole palette and range of exploration in what we can actually embody and experience because I think we also get it gets very myopic in our culture about what does it mean to be not only a human being, but what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a man? And all of these constructs around what that means. And so I love to bring in the exploration of these different, can be archetypes, but also elements of nature and of how we get to express ourselves. And when we get to experience ourselves like, oh, I'm actually made up of water, 98% water, you know, and people still wonder why it is that we're impacted by the full moons. And I'm like, but the full moon literally, like the moon literally changes the tide in the ocean, and the ocean makes up more of the planet than land. I'm like, how can we not deny that we're impacted? So, and I think that that is the relationship we're speaking to that has been, I think so many of us are remembering, learning how to reclaim in our lives because we've been taught to deny it and that deeper connection to earth and our bodies.
Mm,
Beautifully said.
hmm I love that expression like a volcano. That's so healthy.
I resemble that.
What?
Well, well, and right, and what's so beautiful about it is I think it helps people, especially. I mean, it could help men and women, and I've witnessed men and women do this kind of embodiment work. But I think because we can get so stuck in like especially if there's a lot of belief systems around expressing anger. But if I can connect with the element of volcano and I can like,
Mhm.
what is it like to be a volcano? And I was thinking about the volcano in Hawaii that just recently was erupting. I've seen some beautiful imagery of it. It's like, oh my God, it's so magnificent. And I'm like, oh, I want to be a volcano. But if I can feel like, what if I embodied that? What does it feel like if I have that gentle rumble in my belly and I can start to just imagine like becoming a volcano and moving like one, and then what would be a sound a volcano would make. It's not really separating, but it just I think it helps us to get out of this idea of what anger is supposed to look like and be like and feel like, and we get to it gives us a different lens and vessel, if you will, to experiment with. And it's a lot of fun if we let ourselves just let go and explore that kind of embodiment.
It's a great way, and it creates a different kind of how I'm hearing that is it creates a different kind of safety factor because it's you're trying it on. And what might it feel like? I love that, Erin. That's such a good example of um, a way to embody nature and yourself at the same time in that context.
I've seen some really amazing things happen in a room with like a group of women in this kind of embodied experience. I have seen absolute magic happen. I think there is something very magical that happens when women come together too. Um, there is a kind of remembering that happens in that space, and when we're all realizing that we're all feeling the same thing, the fear of expressing ourselves, and then we all recognize we're all thinking the same thing, and then it's like, no, I really want to express my volcano, and so then all of a sudden all this magic happens because there's so much permission in the space to be that, to explore that, to feel that, to just be with what is. And I think when we get to do that with others and really be witnessed with each other, there's so much healing that can happen.
And so you do groups of women. Do you do them online and in person, Erin?
I've done them online and in person, and mostly in collaborations with other teachers that I've been working with for the last 10 years. Both are great. I think what's nice about the online is that, especially if you're new to the work, you get to be in the comfort of your own home and explore sounds and all the things, and then ask questions and have people share, and you get just an experience of what it's like to be in a group if people haven't done it before. But also the in-person experience is really powerful, to come together physically and um, have an experience of those practices in person. And just there's just something about it that's really amazing. But I like both personally, and having participated in all kinds of programs, and I love to have both because sometimes I just like to be in the comfort of my own home and have practice with processing and expressing and making sounds, especially when I was new to it, and then get to come in person when I've had practice with a group of women. So I've done experiences where there's been, say, like a program and then a retreat, maybe at the end. So everyone gets to kind of know each other. And then we get to do all these practices online, and then we get to come together in person. So people have had a chance to kind of get to know each other. But I've also done both, where we've just, at a couple other teachers that I've taught with, where we just, did like a weekend retreat and experience.
Yeah, I would imagine you'd have in person is so powerful.
Yeah.
And that community, which I think is really being called for again right now,
Yeah.
is connection, and literally connection in person and connection
Yeah.
online, with that more of a heart space, not just an intellectual space. And that's what it sounds like you bring to the table.
Yeah, to create a space where we can begin to experience a felt sense of being in our bodies together,
Mhm.
and I think especially now, I think you hit the nail on the head with, I think there is a need for it. Um, I mean, I've experienced it in my life too, where there's just so much going on in the world, and we're constantly distracted by our phones and then our work and on our computers. And, what does it actually mean again to come together, and what does it mean to connect with each other, and in a different way, not by um the kind of usual hi, how are you, where are you from, and what do you do, because that's how we're used to relating, and so that we have some sort of mental idea and story about somebody. What does it actually mean to come and sit with someone and just simply be in their presence
Mm.
and be with whatever comes up, whether it's discomfort or, you know, one person feels comfortable, the other one doesn't, but just being with what is. And then what does it mean to um, practice keeping the focus on my own body and what's happening in my body while I witness another woman
Mm.
sitting across from me, like feeling the feelings I'm feeling while witnessing another woman, and not leaving myself, or not, there's so much, I mean, there's so much happening in a moment, that we miss. And to have like that embodied connection with someone where you can just sit and listen with your whole body. There's such profound healing that can happen in that without saying a word. There's so much that's being said and communicated without having to speak, I think, is what I'm saying. And those are the kinds of spaces that I have co-created with others and myself. Those are the kind of spaces that I love creating, because we get to know ourselves on a much deeper level, than we're just sitting around a table and, well, what do you do for a living, and how do you make your money, and
Yeah.
so it's, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, what I was thinking when you said that is it takes it out of, because I think the patriarchy is what do you do for a living? How do you make your money? That kind of thing. And then to actually like
Mm,
sit there. I'm going to use the term ceremonially and really, listen to each other. And
Yeah.
that's amazing. And checking in with your body. And I think that takes time,
Yeah.
you know?
Mhm.
Well, and it puts the focus more on our presence
Yeah.
rather than, so much of my experience of patriarchal structures is about performing.
Mhm.
And I've honestly also seen this in the embodiment realm, which is why I stepped out of it and decided, like I need something deeper and I want to teach and lead things that are much more deeply connected to the intelligence of the body, a more somatic approach, if you will. Because I think that women are often dealing with, in those patriarchal structures, are often dealing with the male gaze. And so learning how to be totally in relationship with our own bodies, no matter what's happening in this space around us. Because I've seen continued to still see a lot of performance, and also it becomes very undetected, I think, because we're so conditioned to perform in certain ways, we don't always recognize necessarily that that's what's happening, or we're not actually connecting with what's true. And so to continue to create spaces where we can just simply be women and just be with whatever is, and understand that our presence is worth more than anything, than what we do in the world, how productive we are, um, what we said, what we didn't said, what we didn't say, what we did or we didn't do, but literally just the presence of who we are. And my partner and I have this conversation often about, like, in just the world of, like, uh, you know, we all need to pay our rent and pay our bills. And I remember we've had these conversations where he was just like, why can't we just be our, who we are? Why can't I, like, if I'm a good person, I have a good heart, I have a lot of presence, and why can't I just get paid for doing that? And there's ways that I suppose we can, but it's just when we look at how we continue to try to commodify everything,
Mhm.
because it just happens without us even knowing it, because it's so in our conditioning of how can we just sit in this space together and just see the beauty and the value that we bring by simply being.
I love what you're saying because Christy and I, in part of the big part of this podcast was we in our each of our fields we saw these things like very performative, and you're just like, I mean, I this is always my saying, stick a fork in me, I'm so done. You're
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
done watching that. Even in the healing world
Yeah,
there's performance and stuff, and it's sort of oxymoronic. You're like, wait a minute. And
totally.
it's very annoying to me.
It's
And
exhausting.
it is. It
Yeah,
is exhausting. I understand that's part of the culture that we're in and the performance and even that appealing to the male gaze. And I mean, I'm going to be 64 in June. I love getting older. I love it. I
yeah,
love that there's stuff that I just don't. I always say it this way, my bullshit meter exploded. So I'm
Yep.
just like, yeah,
yep,
can't do it, not doing it, don't care. This
yeah,
is this is
yes,
going whatever way it's gonna go.
yes.
For me, I don't care what anybody else does. I was like, I just want to embody, that. And for myself, it's just like, yeah,
Oh,
being in part like letting go of all that programming. And it's impossible to be raised in this culture and not have that, especially as a
Yeah.
woman. It's
100%.
impossible.
It
So
is,
it's like
yeah.
waking up from the nightmare and being like, yeah, I really don't want to participate in that in the way I used to, and not make yourself wrong for but finding a better, way out of it.
Right. I mean, it's like we weren't, it's like coming into the world and saying, well, I didn't ask for this programming. I didn't ask for these patriarchal structures, damn it. And
Yeah,
this is what we're working with. And so, how do we work with this in the kindest way and most loving way with ourselves?
right.
And how do we learn how to take responsibility for our part in the programming? Well, like you had said earlier, Marty, it starts with ourselves. And so that's, and I think for me, like it's always been very important for me to be very transparent with people that I work with because I'm still on the journey myself. And even though I may have a lot more awareness, I am still navigating the insidious programming that we're all working with every day. And I'll have moments where I remember why I was walking with my partner. We were just walking in the neighborhood and we're still newer in Salt Lake City, and we walked by some guy. I think he was putting out his trash. And I walked by and I was like, "Hey, how are you?" And I literally was like, we kept walking. I'm like, who
Right?
was that? Like, and he was like, I don't know. Like your voice just went up 3 notches. And I'm like, okay, anywho, like, and I'm like, that is so weird, but that just happened, and so, and also I will say finding humor has been some of
Oh,
the best medicine
Yeah.
on this
huge.
journey for myself.
Yeah.
And then just walking and laughing and just like, oh yeah, I just did that. That was, there we go. It's
Mhm.
hilarious. There's the programming.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's yes.
Yeah, the humor's huge. And I love that you say that. I know Christy's the same way. I'm super transparent with clients. It's like I'm on a journey. I've always joke and say if you followed me around my house with a video camera, there'd be days you're like, she taps with
Doing
people.
what?
Yeah.
Because it's like human, and I don't want to have to try and live up to this idea like I have it all together.
I love
I
that.
and
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it is the journey, and I mean, the people that I am attracted to the most are like you said, it's like transparent, like, oh, this is a journey. My husband and I have said this many times. We're in counseling together, and I love our therapist because he's like, oh, this is what I'm doing, and he talks so openly about the stuff that he struggles with in his partnership, and it's like, yeah,
It's
hello.
very real. And I think that
Yeah,
that's the thing when we speak to the performative piece that's so important to acknowledge because, and I've seen this a lot in leadership of the lack of transparency creates a lot of distortion
Mm.
for people. I mean, I was actually working with a client. I've worked with her several years. I can't remember exactly what the context of the conversation was, but I think I was sharing with her about my own experience with authority figures and how I got on this path of exploring power. And she was like, "Really? I've just always experienced you as this," because she'd experienced me as a teacher in the embodiment realm. And she's like, "You just
right.
always occur to me as very grounded and this and that." And I'm like, well, I am. And,
And
I have
Yeah.
my own stuff just like everybody else. And I think it was her body relaxed in such a different way, recognizing and understanding that we're all in the same boat.
yes,
Mhm.
And while I do have more, maybe I just have more experience and maybe some, I have training and I have experience working with people, but I actually think that that's part of the gift that I can bring people is that I'm very aware of my own stuff. And
yeah,
so that's how I can actually serve others and help people because I am that aware of my own stuff. And I do spend pretty much every day tracking my own energy and tracking
mhm,
my part in things. Um, and we're all in it together. And I mean, that's what I would like to see more of in leadership anyway,
yes.
is accountability, is responsibility, it's so important to feel leadership in this world, taking responsibility. But
Imagine that.
imagine that. What a different what a different situation we would be in.
We
But
could dream.
yeah. And we can dream. That is the
Yes.
thing. That is part of
Yeah,
it. That is part of what I
absolutely.
think we're all doing
Mm.
is dreaming a new dream. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and showing up exactly like what we're discussing, showing
Hmm.
up transparent as leaders and especially as women stepping into that.
Yeah.
Very
Um,
much so.
I was just thinking that's why Marty and I started this podcast was for that transparency and that there isn't a perfect path. It's not a straight path. It isn't you do A and you get B because there's so many variables that come in with that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I love how you've articulated that, Erin.
Yeah.
And um, I would love a part two to our podcast as
Yeah.
well, because there's other questions I want to ask you about ceremony and what does that mean, and how does that work? Because you bring such a variety to your work, and to
Yeah.
be able to share those gifts with people to see if it resonates with them, because that's what we created the podcast for, again, is to help
Right.
people have resources. And I think
Yeah.
you're a
Yeah.
very valuable resource.
Absolutely. And you're very articulate in how you
Mm.
express it. And then,
Mhm.
yeah. And we definitely are very much like we just want to share other people's work because not every, one thing is good for all. It's like
Right.
helping people find the thing that works for them the best, or, if it's
Yeah.
of course, a combination of things is really important. It's really important.
Oh, I agree. And I am a big fan of the weaving of the modalities. And I don't think that any one person can have the answer or, I think it's so important, right? To have different
Right.
reflections and experiences to find the combination of things that works for someone in particular.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know what works for me and that's what I can speak to. But
Mm.
yeah, and it's yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on here. And I love talking about this stuff because I'm a nerd about it, as I'm sure you guys are nerds about what you do.
Absolutely.
And so it's super fun, especially to get together with other women in leadership and, who are also healers in their own right.
And women not in competition with each other.
Yes.
Yeah,
And,
that
and,
too.
and honestly, that is a huge piece of the coming together and working in groups with women that I have
Yeah.
loved and that I will continue to create more of because I think it's so important. We were taught to compete, and that's
Ugh,
part of
right.
the programming that we're speaking to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
learning how to come together and be allies for each other is
Yes.
so important.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It is, and that helps heal that wound that has been in women for so long. It's referred to as many different things, but that is such a true aspect of the competition, is the years and years of conditioning,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
of not feeling safe with other women
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
and not trusting. And I so appreciate, Erin, your path and your commitment to
Mm,
yourself first and foremost, and then to be able to share those teachings with people. I'm so excited to share you on the podcast, but also to share you with
mm,
people, because um, I think it's so essential to have someone like you to refer to and to experience.
Absolutely.
mhm.
Yep. Very much
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. And we'll share your website. On your website, do you want to talk
Great.
a little bit about
Yeah. How people can get in touch with
they
you.
can, yeah, and work with you?
Yeah, definitely. So, yes, I do have a working website, although it'll probably continue to be in progress, but it's Erin-Kinney, Erin-Kinney, Kinney.com. And there's not much happening on Instagram right now, although I'm going to be, starting to post, especially for offerings and things that I'm offering. You can find me there. My handle is at Queen Erin Kinney. That's just as it sounds, Erinkinney. And then my email address is Erin@Erin-Kinney.com. And feel free to email me. And then there's other ways to connect with me through the website. You can join my mailing list to find out about future offerings. And if you're interested in just finding out more, you're welcome to book a call through the website as well. I offer discovery calls and we can talk about like
Mm.
anything you want to talk about.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. And I'm thinking too, because I know there's people who listen that do groups, and so
Yes.
they could get in contact with you to set something like that up too.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, for group work or
Hmm.
for that offer things. Yeah, I've done a lot of different things with people. You know, I've worked collaboratively with people bringing in like a cow ceremony to retreats and other people's events, and just kind of weave creation with them in that way. And then also I've come into online programs or in-person events and led, certain practices, and it's quite fun. I've done that with other women and things that they were creating, and found different ways to weave in things if people are looking for something a little different. So yes, I'm
Mm,
available for that as well.
so exciting.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. So nice to get this time with you. Very
Yeah,
Yeah.
much.
this is,
And we'll
Even though,
see you again.
yeah,
yep.
we'll see you next time. Yes,
Yeah,
for sure.
absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Erin.
Thanks, Aaron.